Okay, and we're back. Are you ready? Here's the exciting part. We put the kids to bed, put the cat out. We're going to get fun. Why would the cat be bothered? I don't know. So we're going to get rid of the checkerboard, just concentrate on this guy. As you know, ooh, yuck, we don't like that stuff. We're going to make a shader that does it. So how do we do that? This is where the magic of the whole Shamir happens. As you know, we've got our disintegration shader, and we're going to disintegrate into here. And if we go inside of here, this has a bunch of stuff that's going on, but the important thing is we need to get a color that works the way this guy does. So I'm going to make this full size for a second. And all this stuff, as you remember, we had turbulence that we normalized and we did some threshold stuff. We came out with a single number, that's important, and then came out with a color, also important. So I'm going to select all these guys and I'm going to Control C and hope that it works because sometimes this doesn't. And then I'm going to go over into the shader, and inside of the shader I'm literally going to paste all that stuff. Okay? And I know what you're thinking. This is all stuff from a point VOP. What's it doing in a shader VOP? The world's going to end. What's going on? It's actually going to be pretty similar. Your first question is going to be, what do we put in for position? We don't quite have that. But let's worry about that in just a second because there's a little bit of a trick to that. So the first thing I'm going to say is that, you see the surface color? We're going to set this whole thing to not use the point color. Doink. Sorry, I made this larger. It's not going to use the point color, but I thought of that. We're not going to use the point color anymore. This thing could be red for all we care. And we're not going to use the base color as in we're not going to have it be a parameter you pass in. The base color is actually what's going to come out of our color ramp. I'm actually going to turn auto update off right now just so nothing goes wrong. Our color out of our color ramp, that's going to go into our base color. I'm actually going to take this guy and delete him. So now that's what's coming from there. Your next question is going to be, what point do we put into there? And I need to answer that question because there is a little bit of a trick here. I'm going to bring up globals. See, we got global variables. And over here, we're going to have surface globals. So we can even output a single one if we wanted to. Let's go ahead and do that. So let's say this is surface P. Now, what does that mean? That means that's the point on the surface, but it's in object space. It's not in the space that we want, which is world space. So we're actually going to do a transform. It took me a long time to remember what the heck this was called. I'm going to take this guy and put it in here. I'm going to say from whatever the heck it currently is to, let's go into world space. So now this P is going to be P world space. That's what we actually want to use. Okay? Everything else is just mathy math. These guys that are hooked into there, we're going to have to hook up to their appropriate spots. And before we do that, I'm going to say a couple other things. There is inside of here, I won't do this initially. Initially I'll do it without it, then I'll show you. But there's also an emission intensity here, an emission color, and an opacity color, and an opacity intensity, and stuff like that. We're going to put some of this stuff into there. But first, let's just get the basics working before we get too crazy. Okay, so the first thing you're going to notice is that weirdly, way down here is all our stuff, all our parameters from our other things we brought in. So I'm going to do some things that are probably illegal. We're going to make this invisible right now. And we're also going to make some of these other guys invisible. And you're thinking to yourself, that sounds horribly fraught with danger. And it kind of does. But I'm going to do it. The reason is now we just see our things. You notice that when I copy them over, it doesn't copy over, thanks Houdini, the references and stuff. So we actually do have to grab this stuff and have it all linked into that. What I'm basically going to do is copy these guys and inside of the shader, paste copy relative references. And we want to do that with all of them. And you're thinking there's got to be a way to shift click and select all these guys and copy them over. And there isn't, because Houdini hasn't done that yet. And it's another thing I've been complaining about. So there's actually some easier ways to do this, but at this point, by the time I explain it, I'll probably have done it anyway. So I'm literally just going to copy and paste relative references from our animation guy. And they have to be relative, and I'll tell you why later. I'll tell you why now. They're going to be relative because we're going to use this again in another copy of this for the other things like teleportation and so forth. So I'm going to copy all these things without making a mistake, even though I'm talking while I'm doing them. So don't try this at home. The and again, this is why I wish I could copy and do all at once. The Houdini next version, who knows, maybe will. The one thing you kind of watch is amplitude, amp, rough, rough, blah, 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 blah. Now remember, these guys, we could actually keep, instead of doing a relative reference, we could actually paste the same expression in there, but I'm actually going to leave it as a relative reference. I'm going to say that we actually do want the shader to be exactly the same as what the particles were doing. The other thing is our speed ramp. I don't know if you remember way back when, it's so long, that was going to change how things move over time. And I'm just going to memorize that this guy was a 0.11 and a 0.6 in there. So I'm going to put that into here where he had an extra guy who was bonk 0.11, 0.6. He was probably one of those guys or something. I don't remember now. Let's take a look. He was actually, oh, right, B-spline. We made everybody B-spline. I remember that. Those were good days. We were all much younger then. So I'm going to put B-spline on all these guys. Finally, as you recall, whoops, not quite finally. Remember the noise type? The noise type, I'm actually going to, you can actually copy and paste, although it looks like nothing, relative references there as well. Then the color ramp, and again, I wish there's a way to copy and paste a relative reference there, but we're just going to do what it is. We know what it is. It's a thing that goes through teal in the center, so we're just going to do that. Actually, I've forgotten. As it started as white, it said black, teal, white. Great. Memorize that and tell me when I get over here. Black, teal, 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 white. Okay. So now all these parameters are the same, and the only thing that we do with all that, we do the same math, we don't know what the heck it did, and we just use that as a base color. So let's go ahead and see what the heck that does. That's kind of a big deal what we just did there. We put a bunch of stuff in there. I'm going to turn auto update back on. I'm going to go over to the render view. Actually, first I'm going to go to the scene view and make sure things are okay. I guess they are. Things look a little dark there. Interesting. Let's just go to the render view for a second and actually see what happens. Make it a little larger. They can't hit the render button. Ready? Hold your breath. Everybody's got their fingers crossed out there. Bum, 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 bum. Big long. Ooh. So now you can see the exact same thing. Oh, I should have kept that other guy's snapshot. Anyways, you can back up if you want to. The exact same thing, but now it's in shader space. It's literally as high. If we zoom in on this and go closer and stuff, it will go. Actually, let's just do that. Why do I tell people to do things? Let's actually do it. I'm going to zoom in like this, and I'm just going to tell you to use the scene view camera, which should actually then zoom in. And the point I'm going to make is that it's using the actual math. It's not, yeah. So it's using the actual math. So as you get closer, if this was the, from the geometry, that would get lower res on it. You'd start seeing the little tessellations and stuff. This time it's actually in shader space. It's pixel per pixel. It will never get lower. So that is the basic trick. We mimicked one thing inside of another. And now that we've done that, let's actually have some fun, shall we? I actually feel like ending the lesson here because that was so cool. But let's actually go a little bit further. Let's go to, well, heck, let's go to here. Let's see what that does. Oh, the other thing you can see is, I'll show you in a second. Let's go ahead and hit the render button. Some things I'm going to save for the next lesson, but we're also going to put in an emission and opacity from the math as well. So here it is all together, kind of hiding things. I guess I should zoom back out, shouldn't I? Hides things a little bit, but the other thing I want to show is, let's go back, whoops, donk. Just go back to this guy for a second. This shader, ooh, it's giving us an interesting. Apparently I copied and pasted something weird. Oh, the OGL stuff, interesting. Remember when we hid it doesn't really matter for this, but it's kind of like we hid the OGL stuff for it, which we could bring back. I don't really care. I might fix that later, but the thing I want to show quickly before we go to the next lesson is the emission. In other words, by default, this guy's going to render, he's still just clay and getting that color, but I actually want those edges to light up. And I'll tell you why, because those edges should get the same, remember these particles which are glowing are going to come off those edges. So I want those edges to glow too. And that's going to sound just crazy, wazy, but I'm going to do it. So how we're going to do that is we're going to take the, well, first we're going to take an opacity intensity. We're going to take this, let's make this larger, shall we? See this opacity intensity? I'm going to grab, and it's going to seem weird, but I'm going to grab, before we even go into the color, that into the opacity intensity. And I'm also going to take this color and put it into the opacity color. I know before it was from the opacity from that. And then I'm going to do one last crazy thing, which is, I don't know how to explain this. I want it to emit. I want the green and red to be brighter. So over here, you notice there's an emit intensity, but inexplicably not an emission color. Why not? Annoying. But if you hit here and you scroll around a little bit, eventually you find emission color. And it takes a while to find it. It's called emit color, but these aren't necessarily in alphabetical order, by which I mean they're in utterly, practically random order, because Houdini hates us. It took me a while to find this, and so I'm going to find it now as I'm talking to you guys. And we want to put that in there so we can actually give it its own emission color. We can give it a thing. So we have an emission enable. I'll leave that on. Emission color. That's what I'm going to add. Now, all of a sudden, we do have an emission color guy. And we're going to have that color be not that color. See, I've connected to this. We don't actually want that. You know what we want? Do you remember when we did this thing and we were saying where things were going to emit from and whatever the heck it was? This guy? Yeah. Remember, he was blue minus red clamped, right? Let's use that. Let's actually mimic that little gag inside of here and have that be our emission intensity. So taking the color from here, let's do a vector to float, and then we'll do a subtract. We'll literally just do a what was it again? You're supposed to remind me. Blue minus red, I think. Sure. Let's say it's blue minus red. Okay, so it looks like that, little crisscross action. And we're going to clamp it. Clamp between 0 and 1. This, I'm going to call this edge. This is basically edge value or edge brightness. Remember, this is where things emit. So that's going to be our emission intensity. Okay, and then the emission color, oh, I had before. Yeah, the emission color actually will be the color from the ramp. But the emission intensity is going to be from that. Okay, so let's actually just take a look at that, because that was fun, wasn't it? Let's hit that. Now we've got a couple things going and see how things are different. Bump, 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 bump. Feel like we should hold our breath again. Interesting, and it's brighter, but it's not hugely different. Okay, I'll come back to the next lesson. There's a couple things I'm going to clean up. You might notice that it also changed a little bit in its resolution there. A couple things I'm going to get to. Come back for the next lesson. We'll clean all this up.